Hello everyone and welcome to episode 36 of the Nurtured by Nature podcast. Today I'm delighted to be joined in conversation by an amazing powerhouse of inspiration, Meridyth Driskill. This is a conversation that truly everyone needs to hear. You might at first think trauma doesn't apply to you, but think again. This may be the piece of the puzzle we've all been missing. In this truly profound and thought-provoking conversation, Meredith and I discuss the fascinating topic of trauma at the intersection of the climate crisis and eco-activism. We explore nervous system regulation and the impact of fight, flight, freeze and fawn on how we interact with ourselves and others. Learning to understand this natural reflex, your body's innate safety system, will affect not just you but also the people around you and society as a whole, and has huge consequences for how effective we can be at attempting to facilitate the changes that will create a happier, healthier society where nature is truly nurtured. Meredith has so much wisdom to share, critically reminding us that what is common isn't automatically normal. She encourages us to seek new levels of tolerance and kindness towards ourselves, replacing our harsh inner judgment with curiosity and our criticism with compassion, and regularly returns to the idea that whilst it may be simple, it is not always easy to embody. Welcome, Meredith. And thank you so much for joining us today on this episode of the Nurtured by Nature podcast. I'm really looking forward to talking to you, and I think we're going to be exploring some quite interesting topics today and hopefully providing some really useful information for the listeners. But I just get started with all my guests by just asking them to share a little bit about their nature story, which is quite open and it can just be interpreted any way you like, any way that maybe nature's been a part of your life or has become a part of your life in later life. So yeah, if there's anything you'd like to share to get us started, that'd be fantastic.
Absolutely. And thank you for welcoming me. As far as nature goes and my nature story, when you first brought that question up, I started thinking, like, what has my relationship with nature been like? And I've always loved nature. I think one of the biggest, heartbreaks of this society is that we are so disconnected from nature. And when people ask me, like, oh, I don't have any resources, I can't afford anything, like, what's something I can do? Like, go outside.
Yeah.
Go outside, get some sun, put your bare feet in the grass, lay your back against a tree, go for a walk, go for a hike. That's that's a free resource that can have a significant impact upon your well-being. And so we have a nature-loving family. My partner is training to hike the Appalachian Trail.
Oh, wow. Oh, my goodness. That's amazing.
It's a 6-month hike. So he's training for that. So we as a family go hiking a lot. I'm about to leave in a week for 2 weeks hiking the Andes and the Inca Trail.
Oh,
So
incredible. Oh, I went to Patagonia probably just over 10 years ago. It's absolutely incredible energy down there. Amazing. You'll absolutely love it.
I can't wait. I can't wait. We're just hiking to different sacred sites and meditating and hiking to more sacred sites. And I'm so excited just to be in nature and unplugged from all this. So I think that unplug moment is really crucial. And, that brings me to a really important point that talks on nature. In our society, what's common isn't necessarily normal.
Yeah.
And so we hear people all the time like, oh, that's normal. And it's like, actually, that's not normal.
Yeah.
That can, like, so many things in our society, such as screens or our schedules, the 9 to 5 structure, none of that is actually normal. It's common, and there's a big difference. And it goes completely against our nature as human beings to shove ourselves into these boxes. And so when you were talking about, what's your nature moment, it's like, really, while nature itself is a huge part of my life, and I'm so grateful for the moments of sheer bliss that I feel when I'm plugged into that, when I'm dropped in and present. That's
Yeah.
not normal, right? Not common.
Yeah, yeah.
But really, I think the biggest part of my nature story is remembering that I am, in fact, nature.
Yeah.
Human beings we're nature. We are animal bodies
Yeah.
that are being shoved into this mold of 9 to 5s, of setting New Year's resolutions in January when we're supposed to be hibernating. Like all of
Yeah.
these things that are counterintuitive to our animal
Yeah.
bodies,
Yeah.
and just really coming back into natural rhythms.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite quotes is a Lao Tzu quote, which is, nature never rushes and yet everything is accomplished. And so remembering that I am nature and I have a natural rhythm, and I can look to nature and remember that I can be guided by the seasons and know that everything will happen when it's meant to happen, and I'm safe to relax and to reunite my body with what is actually normal
Yeah.
and not what's common. So I think that is just kind of,
Oh, it's amazing, and it's so well, there's so much there already. It's so beautiful. And well, I mean, that's part of why I wanted to bring you on, because your background is working with in a holistic manner with people who are struggling with trauma. And I know from my own experience, and also having done this podcast for sort of the last 18 months, is there's a lot of people who feel very strongly about the environment and the environmental crisis, that are feeling this sort of sense of eco anxiety, and it's sort of this collective trauma around nature and the things that have been done, and that sense of powerlessness, which is sort of layering on top of probably our own traumas. Because I mean, if you want to talk a little bit about trauma, but I know, like, something that you're quite passionate about is the fact that a lot of times trauma used to be seen as something like huge and horrendous that happened to, sort of soldiers at war. And actually, in more recent time, people have realized that actually it's quite often smaller events and things that are little traumas that stack up on people, isn't it?
yeah, there's different types of trauma. There's acute trauma, there's chronic trauma, it's often broken into categories of like big T and little t.
Yeah.
So, like capital T trauma being something like a really acute experience, or really like ongoing, um, regular abuse. And then there's also something that I've called subtle trauma, which is not what did happen to you, but what didn't happen.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
And that can look like not being accepted in your full range of emotions as a child. I think a lot of us probably have the experience with our parents who weren't taught how to manage their emotions. When we get outside of this window of emotional expression, we're told to go to our rooms.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
repeatedly, that signals to us that unless I'm in this window, I'm not okay. And I can be angry, but only in this window. I can be joyful, but only in this window.
Yeah.
And and then I'm too much or I'm not enough, and that puts us into a deficit space, which is a lack of safety.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really powerful, because it is. I've never even thought of it that way, but because it is quite often thought of what happens to you. But yeah, actually being aware of of the areas where you weren't, what do I want to say, provided for, I suppose, in an emotional sense as well, can sets up all of these little sort of patterns, and belief systems about how we feel about ourselves, doesn't it, from an early age?
Yeah. And even with like the big events, trauma again is it's not the event itself, but it's what happens internally in response to the event that occurs. there are all kinds of studies that show that children that go through same experiences, the ones that have a support system or even one person that they have a strong connection with that they can talk to, those kids show extreme resilience and don't show the markers of someone with trauma, as opposed to the children who don't have anything, any support, any connection. And so one of my favorite quotes by Dr. Gabor Mate is, I'm going to paraphrase it. It's, trauma is not what happens, but it's the, it's not, it's the, oh man, I don't want to screw it up, but it's the absence of safety.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I've read some of his books. It's and he's one of the sort of great forethinkers on and sort of getting this more into the mainstream, isn't it? A lot of his work is quite important. Have you got a favorite book of his that you would recommend for anyone who's perhaps like just interested to sort of dip their toe a little bit and find out a bit more?
I honestly think that anything that you can consume from Dr. Gabor Mate will has the potential to benefit your life. I recommend his podcast, his YouTube interviews, if you don't want to sit down with an entire book. But I really love When the Body Says No. As a trauma worker, I do a lot with the human body, and we talk about where trauma is stored in the body. And one of the things that I really would stick my flag in the sand over is that I think the root of most, if not all, dis-ease in the body is chronic stress or repressed emotion.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
and you've had your, that's sort of where the root of your business came from, wasn't it? Was you've had quite a huge amount of your own problems with your body, I guess, I guess for want of a different way of describing it, that has led you on this amazing journey that you followed, hasn't it?
yes, and I'm actually back in a season of having a flare up, and that is something I haven't experienced for longer than a week in 7 years. And
Oh,
so
wow.
it's just a deeper invitation for me to connect with myself and go in and figure out where I can love myself more, where I can approve of myself and validate myself even more, where I can clear the unworthiness wound even more. And yeah, I was hit by a semi truck when I was 17, and I had back surgery when I was 19. And for 15 years, couldn't walk on a regular basis. It was really a
Wow.
crapshoot. Nobody knew like if
Yeah,
I'd wake up and be great, or if I'd wake up and like not be able to walk. And my great was like serious pain, but I could
yeah,
walk.
yeah,
So I've had actually 2 months in to a really big flare up, and yeah, it's brought me to my knees, and it's also brought me back into, okay, there's more work to do, and that's
yeah.
okay.
I
I'm not
think
gonna.
that's something really important, isn't it? Is it's just to remember that it's not that it's inherently bad, or that it's not that it's a one-time job, is it? Either it's like, it's this lifelong journey with yourself. And I love the way that you're saying it's an opportunity for discovery and for going deeper. And you're obviously, you got to the point where you actually had the strength to be able to face this and go deeper. And I think that's the important thing as well, isn't it? Is when you're working with trauma and working with people, and probably most of us have some degree of trauma that you're working with, is having that grace with yourself as well, isn't it? To go gently at the pace, and obviously ideally have the support of someone like yourself, who can guide that process quite gently, and with just hold that space of safety, which is the quote you mentioned earlier for them.
Hmm. And oftentimes we are our number one source of unsafety,
Yeah.
and it all comes from the internal monologue. And this is something that I've really been sitting with for the last 2 months, when even when we know, right, like, oh, this is when human beings are actually meant to hibernate, this is when we're meant to rest, this is when we're meant to reflect, to let
Slow
our bodies,
down.
yes, slow down and
Yeah.
go in. there's still such a societal programming for us, and a pressure to go do, produce.
That hustle mindset and culture, isn't it? It's just
It's,
pervades everything. Like we're,
yes.
you've always got to be at peak production, basically. It's like, and if you're not, then it comes back again to safety. You're seen as weak, and you're failing because you can't sustain this peak energy for 100% of the time.
And as women especially, we're not meant to. We have different energetic levels throughout our monthly cycle, and that it's been frustrating, honestly, going into this experience and being in this experience, even knowing what I know, being a safe place for myself, meaning that I only speak kindly and positively to myself, even if I'm maybe not um getting the outcomes that I want, and that's a direct reflection of my action or inaction,
Yeah,
but like always replacing judgment with curiosity and criticism with compassion. Like those are the two biggest things that can make a huge difference in your own internal landscape. And in this process, it's been like, okay, where are the boundaries of my self-love? Do they end with my productivity? Or can I still bring self-love and allowance and compassion into into this phase where I physically cannot be as productive as I would like? Yes, I would love to be at yoga. I would love to be at the gym, and I would cause extreme injury if I were.
yeah,
And so, yeah, it's just like, where are the boundaries of my self-love and how can I stretch those even further? Knowing what I know and still feeling the programming of go, do, be, hustle,
yeah,
grind. It's still there. It's
yeah,
just having to like actively and consciously detach from it of like, no, that's not where my worth is. My worth is here.
yeah. Yeah, I love that. Those two things that you said there in relation to yourself. I'm like, oh my goodness, that just has like this huge connotation for the world as well. It's like, obviously a lot of this, I think a lot more people are realizing that actually that there's a healing journey within themselves, but actually that then has this beautiful ripple effect on the world around them, and that can be their immediate family, their immediate relationships, but also it's just the energy that we're putting into the world. And I love that way you were saying, like, replace criticism with compassion. And it's just like, if we can learn to sort of hold that with ourselves, where we're probably the harshest judge of people, aren't we, on ourselves, then it does set us up to sort of bring that energy into the world as well, which can have just, no, I'm excited. I love it. I'm like, oh my God, that's just like this beautiful, and it seems so simple, but I think it is hard. And it's like you said, it's like this constant, like, awareness is a big thing, I think, isn't it, for people, just gradually raising your own awareness of the dialogue you're having with yourself as well, and realizing that you're probably speaking to yourself in a way that you wouldn't dream of speaking to someone else.
Exactly. That's always the biggest test. Like, would you speak to a 7-year-old that way? Or would you speak to your best friend that way? Absolutely not. So why would you speak to yourself that way? And that's what I mean when I say, like, oftentimes when we're in an unsafe space, I mean, so often we are the creator and experiencer of that unsafe space. So that's been part of this journey for me lately too, is like, how do I become just like so safe for myself,
Yeah.
where like even in mistakes or repeating patterns that I would love to see closed out,
Yeah.
right? It's not bringing in the judgment and the
Yeah.
criticism and the harshness and you're never going to beat yourself up into change.
Yeah.
Um Not sustainably anyways. Like you cannot hate yourself into transformation. You can only love yourself into evolution.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. I love that. Yeah. Wow. No, I do. I think we've touched on it a couple of times, but you mentioned like this idea of safety, and I guess that really relates to basically our nervous system, and again, this comes back to nature as well, and it's how, it's this sort of like intrinsic, fundamental, basics of how we're wired to react, and unfortunately how stress plays and our hectic lifestyles plays into that sense of lack of safety in our nervous system.
Yeah. Safety is the lack of, or it's the fear, right? The presence of loss, harm, deficit, injury, death, pain.
Yeah.
And when we're in those spaces, we're in unsafe spaces. So by definition, shame then becomes an unsafe space, right? When we're in a space of deficit, shame is deficit, right? Being too much, not enough, wrong, bad, deficient. So when we're in shame spaces, we're walking around not feeling safe. And
Yeah.
again, it's like, am I the perpetuator and creator of this, or is it coming from somewhere outside of me? And a lot of times we'll experience it outside of us first, and then it becomes our inner, right? Our nervous system
Yeah.
gets attuned to that. And so we keep ourselves in these spaces. And so that's a lot of the work. It's yes, things outside of our control happen to us, just like, I mean, at the world at large, with the environment, with the things that are happening in and on and to the earth. And
Yeah,
then
I was just listening to your list then, and I was like, oh, you could relate everything that you've just said to the environment and, the new, well, the it's the news we receive about the environment, I think, is particularly what relates to that list that you said, the deficit and all of that, all of the news that we're getting from the mainstream media about the environment literally sat like tick at every box on your list there, which is then, it's this sort of, you're like a sponge as well, aren't you? And you're getting all of this sense of all of that sort of bearing down on you, and I'm feeling, that people are feeling unsafe about the future of the world, really. And when you layer that with your own traumas as well, it's no wonder that it's becoming a sort of a more of a topic that's being discussed, I think, in the world, which is good, is what it needs to. We need to discuss this more so that we can provide people with ways to help, because I think that's the thing, is there some of the things that trauma can cause in the body. People think it's like a label for life, and you can't ever heal from it. And what I think is so powerful about your story is like the amazing like healing transformation that you've been through personally, and helped your clients work through as well, through all of the modalities that you work with to help sort of, I get it, is soothe the nervous system a good description?
regulate,
Yeah.
learn how to ride it, how to know where you are, where your state is, how to shift your state, how to be with yourself in any state, and know that you also don't have to stay there.
Yeah.
And the really fun line is like, how do I like really honor and be with myself and be with what is, and also know that I can shift my state without bypassing anything. So
Yeah.
that's a big part of stuff that I see in, especially in like the online and the spiritual and the self-help community, that there's a lot of bypassing going on, and it's a
Yeah.
fun line to walk, but it's important. That's a really important line to be intimate with. Um, and yeah, the way that this relates to, I mean, the way that I'd honestly never sat down and thought about it until like the connection of like the environment and trauma, but I'm like, now I feel like I could talk about it for a day and a half.
I know it's something quite a few, I guess it actually was during COVID. I was actually doing an online course with an eco-activist artist, and she has something called trigger point theory, and it's just a different way of looking at a situation. I don't even want to say a problem, because it's, again, not wanting to put that connotation of good or bad onto something, but just a situation. And one of the things that I saw at that point was, I was like looking at sort of conservation areas and the impacts on the, the how the community sort of interact with these conservation areas. And I was thinking, well, like when the communities have been through quite like traumatic experiences. I spent quite a lot of time in Africa, so there's still there's certain areas that I've spent a lot of time that are still they've still got a lot of difficulties with how the culture is, and sort of rebel forces and sort of war and things like, quite extreme trauma things for people. And it was like, when these people are in those spaces of trauma, then it is really hard to, like, they're in survival, like they're literally in survival, and you can't judge them for that. Like that's how anyone in that situation would be. And I do think it is for us here, where we haven't got those sort of huge external um factors, large traumas, but we are still aware of all of the impact of the environment and feeling this sort of powerlessness as well, and not knowing how to help, and that's having, this sort of constant impact on us. So yeah.
Yeah, speaking of fine lines, that's one, right? Knowing that we can be instruments of change, we have the potential to make a positive impact. And at the same time, now anytime I'm thinking about activism, right, we're fighting something.
Yeah.
And there's two different energies that I often see from activists. And one will be a really empowered, like, this is the vision that I see, this is the vision that I hold, this is the possibility that I know is alive and is
Yeah.
real, that we can connect to. And there's so much hope there. And so they're moving from a place of empowerment and inspiration and love and devotion. And then a lot of activism that I see is rooted in the scarcity space,
Yeah.
coming from a space of not feeling safe. And again, there's no shaming anyone who is in that space, right? We've all been there in some capacity at some point in our lives in relation to some topic. It just is, right? So, but I see a lot of activism coming from a space of scarcity, and they're in a fight response.
Yeah.
It's not what's possible, what are we dreaming, what is the vision of the future, let's create the things that we want. It's an absolute fight response of, we have to fight the bad guys. We have to fight what we don't want. And they're completely different energies. And knowing people on both sides of that, having been on both sides of that, the energy and the experience is completely different. And I think that the outcome is really different too.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
really
I love that. I love the way you've really crystallized that into, and it's, I mean, I'm not perfect at all. None of us are. But I think that's the space I'm trying to come from, is this space of, like, more hopeful empowerment, not in a naive sense that I'm just denying that any of it exists, but just in a sense of, like, that's that, I don't know, the, like, the sort of rising tide lifts all boats, and it's that chain. And I guess that's sort of the sort of nervous system ladder as well. Like, there's a little analogy there, isn't there, of, like, lifting out of this sort of lower nervous system responses of fight and flight and freeze as well, which is also a very important one to be aware of, and lifting into this more regulated state where you are just, I guess, just more expansive, and you're able to have, like, these deeper, more serious conversations, and just approach things in a more collaborative manner, I think. I don't know if that's that sort of,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you touched on something really important. The window of tolerance is that space that you're referring to, where that people might have heard it called rest and digest, but it's when we're capable of having connected conversations where we have full executive functioning happening, we have full access to this. But as soon as we move out of that, as soon as we move into a state of fight or flight, our hearing change, something happens in our inner ear,
Oh,
and we no longer can hear the human voice. Like, I mean, we know that it's there, right?
yeah.
But we can't. Our inner ear does this crazy thing where our hearing changes, and we tune out the pitch of the human voice, and we tune into really high and really low frequencies. And that is a survival mechanism where we can hear if all the birds are flying away because there's a predator, or if there's something rumbling in the brush. Like, that is what's happening. And so when we leave that window of tolerance, of course we can't have a productive and loving and constructive conversation with someone else. We can barely hear them. And then when we're activated, when we're in that fight state or flight state, or even the freeze, the fawn state, I have a lot to say about nervous system and polyvagal theory and things of that nature. Fawn state, I think, I mean, we're still somewhat connected to our our social engagement system, because we can read a room and we can people please and we're thinking our way
Yeah.
through something. But when we're in freeze, when we're in fight, when we're in flight, we don't have access to our resources to be able to solve problems. We don't
Yeah.
have problem solving skills, right? We're going to fight the thing, we're going to run away from the thing, we're going to freeze and pretend that it doesn't exist and, la 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 la. So when we're in that window of tolerance, when we're able to be regulated within ourselves and feel safe within our own bodies, that's when we can sit down and say, okay, we have a situation on our hands. This is far away from our ideal situation, our ideal outcome. This is not healthy for any of us. So how do we work together? How do we collaborate? How do we access our social engagement system that you're only going to have full access to when you're in that window of tolerance, in the rest and digest, the calm, cool, collected, you're okay, right? That's where the progress comes from.
Yeah.
That's the only space that sustainable transformation is going to come from. And when you look out and you see, you're like looking at activists, you're like, man, that is a big fight state. So they can't even hear if someone is saying like, hey, why don't we try this? Why don't we do this? They're so clicked into, I have to fight the bad thing. I have to fight the bad guys. I have to end this, right? And it's like, we have to be able to sit down and have a conversation.
Yeah. And bring everyone to the table. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's and again, going back to saying, there's no judgment here from either of us. We're just here to like try it and sort of raise awareness for people to sit there and think, well, hang on, what state am I generally operating from? Because we all fluctuate. We're not all necessarily stuck in one particular state all the time, but what state am I functioning from when I'm having certain reactions, when I'm having certain conversations, and then how can you sort of bring awareness to that, and having brought awareness, go, okay, how do I regulate myself in these feelings and situations so that I can, well, I mean, it benefits as you, like, it obviously, like we've talked about health and wellness and the effects that these have on your nervous system, but also how we can benefit the society, community, the world, the environment. And I think that's why I was so excited to talk to you, because I just think this.
Gosh. Sorry, my dog is just
Oh,
freaking out. Scared me. So sorry for the interruption. We back up to a bunch of woods, which I love. And so we'll have critters in the backyard. Looks like there's.
He spotted one.
I can't see what he's looking at, but he is at full alert. Anyways, so sorry. Whew,
no,
I'm back.
no, not at all. No. You just went. You went into a startle.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how quickly it happens.
Yeah.
That's how quickly it happens. Because I totally, now like thinking, I didn't hear exactly what you said. I knew that you were talking, but I was like, what's happening? Is there a predator approaching the back door? That's how fast it happens. Ooh, and now we take a deep breath and we come back into our body.
Yeah.
Come back into safety. Okay, I'm back where my feet are. Good.
I mean, can you talk about maybe some ways that people could easily start to manage, if they've started to think, oh, hang on a minute, maybe I am in, the not in the rest. Let's say, so the ideal is the rest and digest stage of your nervous system. And if you're sort of thinking, well, I don't think I'm sitting in that space, are there some easy tools that we could share for people that they could just have a little play around with, begin to sort of notice, I guess, because that's the thing, isn't it? It's beginning to experience maybe like just little glimmers of like, oh, I can feel different, like my existence could be different. And then that's, once you've had that little look at it, you know something to grow on, don't you?
One thing I want to touch on really, really quickly, and then I'm going to answer that question, is that you said the window of tolerance is the ideal state. I want to share, because when people get into nervous system regulation, they're like, I have to get regulated. I can't be in fight or flight. Like, that's bad, right? So all of a sudden, like the trauma responses, the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, they're looking at those with judgment, and like those are bad. The window of tolerance is an ideal state for us to be in most of the time. And there are certain times when it is absolutely ideal for you to be in fight or flight.
Yeah.
It's absolutely ideal for you to be in freeze or fawn. And so I don't want to make those like bad or wrong,
Yeah.
because that just right, that perpetuates the shame space. I'm bad, wrong, broken, not good enough, not enough, too much. So, and that's the shame space, and that's unsafe. So just like to make that really clear when I'm talking about this work, so that we can start to just like strip off the layers of shame that we put on ourselves without realizing. But to answer your question, some quick things that you can do. I mean, first of all, like literally going out into nature is my favorite thing. Sitting in the grass, taking a deep breath, looking around, like really breathing, breathing into your feet, breathing into any contact point that you have with the ground. So if that's, and like really paying attention to that. And it sounds really simple. Something you said earlier, it's simple, but it's hard. That's when I say it all the time. It's simple. It's not easy. But breathing into any awareness that you have of where you're touching the ground. Maybe that's my feet. Maybe that's the lower part of my thighs, my butt. Maybe it's my back against a tree or on the grass. And so just like really starting to breathe and coming back into your body, because we live in such a cerebral culture. And so many of us are dissociated all the time and don't even know it.
Yeah.
So coming back into your body and using that, the awareness of where is my physical body right now. That's why I said when I got activated just then, I was like, okay, I'm back where my feet are. We leap to, we're up here all the time, or we leap, our soul is like, I'm out. Not our soul, but our psyche, or our awareness, right? It's like, I'm out of, this is not a safe place to be. I live up here now. So just like coming back into our body as much as possible with awareness, with touch, with sound, with breath. Anytime I start to feel any kind of like funk going on, I will identify where I feel it in my body. So maybe it's in my stomach, and I'll imagine breathing into that sensation wherever it is. And then I'll kind of sit with it for a second and be like, what if this sensation had a sound? What would that sound be? And then I will just sound it, just like as unhinged. I don't care. I do it in crowds all the time, because I'm like, no one's gonna know that this weird like bellow is coming from me. And I feel funky from, maybe it's the amount of people. Oh my gosh, as I get older and I come into more awareness, so many things that I thought that I loved were actually just like me living on adrenaline. So like thinking that I loved crowds and loud noises and busy places, like that was really cute, baby girl, but that was trauma. That was a trauma response. I actually don't enjoy those situations and scenarios often. And so if I'm like in a big crowd of people, I will like, okay, I've got some funk in my belly. Okay, so I'll just and I'll just like, I'll sound it. So there's 3 ways to move stuck energy: breath, sound, and movement. And that's that stuck energy that's in there, repressed emotion, you bypassing your own feelings of discomfort, connecting to that, and then moving it, breath, sound, and movement. Any way that you can move that, because it takes so much energy to push those things down. It takes so much energy to know that they're there and try to pretend that they're not, so that you can keep going, so that you can keep being productive, so that you can keep being judged as good enough and approved of and validated and worthy and loved by our society. It's so deep, the conditioning. But so moving, like making sounds whenever you feel some funk in your body, just being with it, learning how to be with it. One of my favorites is massaging the inner ear, just giving it a good wiggle, stimulating your vagus nerve, humming. So the sigh is great. So just starting at a higher pitch and dropping into a lower one. I also, if you're really activated, anytime my clients are activated, I'm like, put your back against a wall right now. Feel the wall behind you. And I want you to turn, and I want you to scan your entire environment. Around. There are no apex predators in your current environment, right? And if there are, get into that flight state and NGT up, right?
Get out. So, get out while you can.
Like if there's a predator, please flee. Call for help. Sound the alarm. Like that it's not ideal in that moment to be in your window of tolerance, right? Like go. But look around, there is no apex predator. All of my needs are currently provided for, right? Most of us that have the privilege of being able to listen to a podcast, our direct needs are probably provided for.
Yeah.
I have a roof over my head. I have water next to me. I have food upstairs that I can go eat, and I have connection of a fuzzy little dog right next to me. I absolutely view connection as a need, and I think that's one of our biggest lacks of basic needs that aren't getting met. Connecting with someone, co-regulation. Regulation is so, so important, and one of the fastest ways to get regulated is to be in the experience of someone else who is regulated. And so just having a person or a group of people or somewhere that you can go where everyone's like really zen and mellow, like this is one of the reasons why like yoga and breath work and things like that are so important. We're getting to drop into a collectively regulated system.
Yeah.
You get to feel that, and our body responds to that so quickly. It does that in nature. Nature has a really great way of really quickly dropping you into a regulated state, especially when you are present and you're not up here spinning.
Yeah, no, there's quite a few times when you were talking, and I was thinking about, I've got horses, and I was thinking about like the three things that you said, like movement, breath, and sound. And I was thinking when they get a fright, like their immediate reaction is run, because they're a flight animal. So they go straight into that sort of flight response. Then they'll, if they're sort of like, oh, nothing's actually chasing them, they'll stop, turn around, look at the thing, and quite often like do a big like snort, so quite a loud noise, and then obviously quite a deep breath as well. So you've got like those three things, like immediately, like you've got the movement, the sound, and then the breath. And they'll stand there sort of looking and breathing, and then eventually they'll be like, okay, actually it was, it wasn't a lion this time. We're fine. It was a plastic bag or something like that. And it is, that's the thing with it. This is intrinsically wired into our DNA, isn't it? These like nervous system responses, and it's just unfortunately because of the stress that we endure, I suppose, really in our society, and this, like we mentioned earlier, this sort of perpetual expectation of production and peak performance, that we get so dysregulated. And also, like you touched on, trauma responses as well from experiences that we've had, whether that is things that have happened to us or not happened to us, that have set us up for not being able to regulate ourselves as naturally as we should do. But it's not something that, like you said, it's not good or bad or broken or need fixing. It's just something that we can, by working with someone like yourself, learn the tools to help ourselves like move through life and let these things move through us. Because I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's about being able to move up and down like the scale of nervous system regulation without judgment, but not getting stuck just in one place. That's the problem, isn't it? Is when you just get stuck and you can't move in or out of it that you would do naturally.
Exactly. And even not judging that, not judging the stuckness. I tell my clients all the time, I'm like, because they'll be like, oh my God, I need to like, oh my mean, and I have people, we name parts of ourselves, and so like we'll name our inner mean girl. And so I'll have a client that's like, oh my God, Heather's being so loud, and like I know, like I just need to shut her up. Or someone will be like, I'm in a flight state, and I've got to regulate, and it's actually like, can you just be okay? Can you just like instead of doing this, just let go. And can you be okay with where you are? Because based on how you grew up, this is actually a divine intelligence that has developed this mechanism to keep you safe. Because on a physiological level, you love yourself so much that you did anything and everything necessary to keep yourself safe and in connection to your caregivers and in connection to your needs being met. And a lot of times that looks like self-abandonment. A lot of times that looks like people pleasing, or exiling parts of ourselves, repressing our emotions. That's all learned stuff. But every single bit of that as an intelligence, you are perfectly functioning for everything that you have been through. Even if you are in a chronic response, a chronic trauma response, and that's what chronic stress is, right? It's not being able to downregulate and come back into that window of tolerance. And based on the news that you see when you turn on the television, the traffic, the screens, like all of the input to this system, this animal body that is not normal at all of the stress that's coming in, of course, we're staying dysregulated. So it's like, how can I be okay with that and not add on the shame, right? Add on creating internal unsafety, lack of safety inside because of our judgments, but say, okay, this is how this is. And I'm okay with that. I have the capacity to be present with that, to accept that, and now to choose something different. And you just bring in the awareness and like, okay, this is where I am. And that's okay. I still love myself right here. And I'm so thankful to all of my mechanisms that are trying to keep me safe. Now, let's see if this is like let's see if this is accurate, right? Because evolutionarily, we were meant to run from predators, right? Tigers, lions, dinosaurs, like legitimate apex predators. Our society has evolved so much faster than our nervous systems. So now we're sitting in traffic, like I'm going to be late and my boss is going to yell at me, and our body is responding as if we are looking at a tiger that is very hungry. It's not like we have mismatched inputs, right? So it's just like, okay, I'm in traffic and my boss might yell at me. Okay, so I'm going to take a deep breath, right? I'm going to come back into my body. Maybe I'm going to have a primal scream. Lord, I love having a primal scream in the car. It is good. It is good. If you've never just screamed in your car, like 10 out of 10 recommend. And then I always end up laughing at myself because I'm like, what are the people around me thinking? And so like when you are like with an emotion, when you can be with an emotion and move it, like so quickly it turns into laughter. But I'm like all the time, I can't cry without laughing at myself now because I like can zoom out and see myself and see how hysterical the situation is that like,
I
I'm
think
crying
that's
over.
a big thing, isn't it? Is you mentioned like not denying like your feelings as well, like
Crucial.
just embracing them and accepting them, and I guess that's like we're talking about embracing and accepting ourselves as well, and all feelings, and that's that I mean you've just mentioned like like fear, but like if you're angry as well, it's like it's it's not nothing is part of what you do, the work you do is nothing is good or bad. It's releasing that judgment and just having the awareness of saying a part of me is just feeling this, and I think that's something else you do is parts work, isn't it? And it's family systems, which I also find fascinating, and I think it's quite an empowering technique for people as well, isn't it?
One of my favorite modalities. It's incredible. Oh my God, I love internal family systems and parts work. It's just, how can I shift my relationship with this thing, right?
Yeah.
We could legitimately record an entire another podcast just on the importance of feeling your emotions.
Well, we might have to do that. I feel I feel like we might have to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, I have so much to say too about about the environment and about the space that we come from when we are trying to make a positive change in the world. And I mean, there's just so many different angles that I've literally never thought about it in this perspective. And now I'm like, oh wow, there's like this victimhood here, right?
Yeah.
We're in the trauma, drama, oppression, trap triangle of victor, villain, victim. And I mean, like, I'm always running myself through that lens. Where am I in the triangle? Am I the victor? Am I the villain? Or am I the victim? I personally am very good at being the victim. That's what I was
I
modeled.
think a
And
lot of us probably
yeah,
are, aren't we? I think, yeah.
yeah. And so it's like, okay, is my action here? While right, the judgment piece again, like, of course I want something good. There's like a positive outcome here. To I want for us to respect our planet and treat it better for ourselves, for the planet itself, for our future, right, as humans. And it's like, but what space am I in coming to this fight, right?
Yeah.
Am I the victim? Am I the victor? And then of course there has to be a villain. So then we get into our activated state, whatever
Yeah.
flavor that is for us, and we're in fight or flight, or we're in freeze. And then usually I see people, you get really worked up about something, you get passionate about it. Of course, we all do. That's normal. No judgment, right?
Yeah.
I've been really incredibly passionate about the environment before. And I mean, I am, but like I've gotten really worked up and really emotional about it. It's easy to do when it's a cause that matters to us.
Yeah.
When we're doing that, then the people on the other side, right? The
The
villain,
villains. Yeah.
people that we're trying to change, right? We're trying to inspire different behavior from
Yeah.
them. We're trying to impress our values upon them and have them say, you know what, you're right. And I'm going to take on your values and I'm going to act differently because of this. If they're being screamed at, if someone's coming at them from a fight state, their animal body feels that and is going to respond. So what's going to happen? Their inner ear is going to shift. They're not going to hear what they're saying. And they're going to engage in, I have to get out of here. I'm going to freeze and tune you out, or I'm going to fight you.
Yeah.
Their positive change is not coming from that space. So and like we have one earth. We have like love your mother, right? And just like the amount of love and care and devotion that I feel to this earth, that is an extension of a large extension of my physical body, right? I am the four elements. And there's just so much, I'm getting emotional. There's so much love that I have for this planet that we're on. And so like, how can we get regulated, and then how can we go out and maybe not save her, right? Maybe it's, how do we love her? How do we cherish her? How do we honor her? And how do we honor all beings in the process of that? Like you said, there are people in Africa who have exceptional systemic oppression. So how they're getting rid of their garbage is not their first priority, right?
Yeah.
I lived in Cambodia and I was just floored by the amount of garbage everywhere, and how they just burn it. And it's in the ocean. So it was heartbreaking, honestly. And it's like, well, this is a developing country. These people experienced a mass genocide not that long ago. This entire population has PTSD, right? They're not, they're concerned with food, with clean
survival,
water.
just the basic survival.
Yeah. So honestly, I really feel that, okay, so this is getting me on my soapbox and my big, I truly believe that trauma is the root of every issue that we have on the earth. I feel like if enough of us addressed our trauma, every single human on this earth would be fed, clothed, and hugged. What would happen if every human being on this earth was fed, clothed, and hugged? Now we have a whole lot of people that are no longer living in survival. And what does that mean? That means that we have so many more resources and so much more access to ability to make positive change for the planet that we're on. We're not like, screw it, we'll destroy the earth for whatever resources we can get, right? If we can heal enough trauma, then we have people that are living from their hearts and not their wounds. They don't get run by greed. They're not trying to amass as much as possible so that they can finally feel safe, when it's not the money that's ever going to make them feel safe, right? It's their attachments, it's their inner wounding. So when we have the leaders of the world doing trauma work, now we have people who are like, oh, maybe I don't need all of this stuff, and this hoarding of resources and supplies, this is a trauma response. What can I actually do? What do I care about? What am I passionate about? How can I actually breathe life into the earth with all of the things that I've accomplished and acquired, right? How can I use these resources to make the world a better place? Because I think that's what we're all here for. And so with enough people doing trauma work and going in and learning how to have the capacity to be with themselves in all states, feel all emotions, and be okay with themselves in those states, then we can start to, we have an entire society, the entire world moving out of.
We can start building, can't we? We can just, we start building this future where we can have collaboration, where we can, like you said, use people's resources. I mean, I think it's quite an interesting thing that, like, quite often in trauma, sort of therapy, do I want to say that word? I'm not sure. But like, one of the key things is, how do you resource yourself? But it's like, actually, it's twofold, isn't it? Because by regulating yourself, you actually get access to your own resources, and therefore you can have this better impact not better, judgment again. Oh, see, there's a lot of that, isn't there? But you can just show up in the world in just this more empowering manner to be there for other people. And I just, wow. I mean, I feel like, yeah, we're gonna have to come back and do, like, session 2, but and I kind of feel like this is like a really lovely place to end, because I agree with absolutely everything that you've said there, that I do, this is part of what I'm trying to sort of bring through with my podcast, is that I do think, like, there is this core, like, of trauma that every single person is dealing with on some level. And actually, if I can help bring through people like you and resources for people that are wanting to do something, most of the people who are going to be listening to this podcast, they care about the natural world. That's perhaps their motivating factor, but there are other motivating factors for people who want to see people not, starving, not struggling, not, this, for the community and humanity perhaps is more of a driving force for some than the environment. But yeah, I do just completely agree with you that, like, trauma is just such an important topic, and I think it needs more attention. And I think the beauty is you can move through it as well. It's not just a label. You don't need to just be like, I've got PTSD and that's it for the rest of my life. It is something you can recover from and move through. And yeah, it's been it's been amazing talking to you. But I definitely think I'm going to come back to you, and we're going to do another episode and sort of delve in a little bit deeper, because I can see you're like, you've got loads of ideas, and I'd love to learn more from you, because I know there's just so much that you do. But is there anything you'd like to sort of leave people with right now, and then and we can come back in the future?
Well, I have lots of free resources on my website. Now I'm like, okay, what resource do I make that, like, is in reference to maybe a larger, more zoomed out approach, like, the the things that are happening on our planet right now, both with humans and the environment and animals. There's just so much that, yeah, learning how to be with your feelings is so necessary in this process. So necessary. So I have a free resource in the works right now, literally called How to Feel Your Emotions, because there's so many people be like, I don't know how to, I actually don't know how to do that. When you learn that feeling your emotions is not just thinking about them. Like, that was one of the biggest breakthroughs in my life. Oh my God, I haven't been feeling my emotions. I've just been thinking about feeling them. Whoa. So I have a free resource for that coming really soon. And that's really important to process when we are um, fighting things, right? When we're trying to affect a change in the world, when we're trying to see something different, that's coming from an emotional activation. And so we have to learn how to be with that emotion so that we can be regulated
Yeah.
and take the action, right? And be the change. So my website is www.easywonderfullife.com. And just go to the freebies tab. I've got different freebies in there. It's a little bit of a stretch, but I have a journal called Heal Your Mother Wound. And I'm sure that if you were to approach, I'm sure there would be some parallels between our relationships with our mother and the earth.
Yeah. Yeah. And just for everyone, the link to your website will be in the description for the podcast and the podcast show notes. So it's you don't have to quickly scribble that down in case you're driving somewhere or you haven't got a pen. It will be in the link below, so you'll be able to hop through and explore more of Meredith's offerings. I know you do also do one-on-one work with clients, and you have various courses as well. So if people are feeling like, actually, this has been a bit of an aha moment for them, that they have perhaps, sat there and thought, actually, I've got some deeper things that I want to perhaps work through, they'll be able to get in touch with you through the website as well, if they want to explore working with you.
Through the website, DM me on Instagram. I'm a real person. I love connecting with people. DM me, ask questions. I love having conversations. I think that it's really through conversations like this one that we begin to change the world. So slide into my DMs. Let's chat. I have resources for that can meet anyone where they are, from free to to paid, to group, to one-on-one. I have options that run the gamut. And again, I believe that healing should not be reserved for the wealthy. Yeah, come connect with me. I just really ultimately want to love on more humans.
Yeah, no, well, I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's like it's what we said a few times, haven't we? It's it sounds easy, but it's not as
It's simple, it's not easy.
yeah. It's simple, but it's not easy. And but that is the key. It's love, isn't it? You know, it really is. I mean, it might sound a bit sort of, hippie and new age, like love is the answer, but it is. It's just, if we can learn to love all parts of ourselves, and we can, then sort of move into this nicer, less reactive, collaborative space, we can start having these harder conversations, start coming together in community where we can co-regulate with each other, but we can also, the power of a resource community coming together and the amazing answers and solutions that we could come up with if we can all sort of learn to move into that space. And and just honor ourselves as well, isn't it? It's just honoring everything, learning to feel our feelings and process them and move through them. And it's been amazing talking to you. I am excited to come back and talk to you again. I feel like I've found a pea in my pod, or someone who completely just gets the way that I think is really amazing. And it's just been fantastic to share you with everyone. And I'm excited to come back and have another conversation with you as well.
I've got more to say, but I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Meredith. It's been fantastic. And for everyone listening, stay tuned. There will be a part 2 in the not too distant future, hopefully. Thank you so much for listening to the Nurtured by Nature podcast. I truly hope this conversation has brought some hope and inspiration into your life. I would love to have these messages ripple out across the world. So if you can, please share this episode with your friends. Leave a review on your favourite podcast player and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. I would love to hear from you, so please feel free to connect with me on the links provided in the podcast description. But most importantly, thank you so much for being a part of this journey with me. But don't forget to simply get out there and enjoy the natural world.